It's 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday. I head to the kitchen to pour myself a fresh brewed cup of coffee as I get ready for a new sneaker drop. For sneakerheads, there are no days off. The current world of sneakers is an exciting one, with new releases announced every month. But the caveat to this is the hype that follows certain releases, as the sneaker industry reaches a value of $79 billion according to some estimates. We no longer have to endure waiting long lines overnight at stores, but instead gather in front of our phones and computers as we watch the clock count down. It's 7 a.m. I click on the link and stare at the thought on the screen. On rare occasions when I am very lucky, I reach the page, quickly find the shoe size, and check out as fast as I can. If I'm able to check out, I return to my childhood self for the next several weeks, waiting for the package to arrive. I'll find myself checking my emails every day to see if there's an update on the order status. Once they're in my hands, nothing beats the excitement of opening a new box of sneakers. Oddly enough, it's a process that starts with smelling a fresh scent of glue, feeling the sneaker material slip my fingers, appreciating the design with my eyes, and finally, getting them on feet. However, oftentimes I end up with an L. In other words, I miss out. If I really want the sneakers, I'll end up at reselling sites such as StockX, GOAT, Railed, or eBay to purchase sneakers at a premium price. So what makes certain sneakers so hype? From my perspective, it's all about the collaborations. The uniqueness of the shoe, the name behind the design creates a high demand. Every sneakerhead, at one point, imagines releasing their own collaboration. That is why today, I'd like to both take some time to appreciate what makes us fall in love with certain sneakers and share our own unique casual contemplation podcast collaboration.
Welcome to the Casual Contemplation Podcast. I'm Philip.
And I'm Casey.
Casey and I were roommates through college, and now we're long-distance friends who rarely get the chance to talk about anything at length.
So, we've created this podcast as a place where we can chat about different hobbies and interests. We're far from experts in anything, but we hope you enjoy our casual take. As a quick disclaimer, comments made in this podcast is a matter of personal opinion. Also, you may notice some disruptions in the recording. Please keep in mind that we're recording this from 2 different locations. Thanks. Hi guys, welcome to the Casual Contemplation Podcast. Today's episode is about sneakers. As a longtime sneakerhead or sneaker connoisseur, I'm excited for this one. To kick things off, let's first talk about our relationship with sneakers. So Phil, have you always been a sneakerhead?
I don't want to say that I've always been a sneakerhead, but I have been interested in shoes at various stages of my life.
Sneakers have always been part of our upbringing, I'd say. We've been exposed to sneakers to some extent. For you, I think it was through basketball. Now, you've always shared with me that you've liked, what were those shoes called?
I like the Kobe's, definitely. I actually had this Adidas Kobe shoes, the first one he came out with. The Answer 6s, which they came out with, the Reebok ones, Iverson shoes.
Yeah, I remember those. The original came out in 1996, right? And I think they were recently retroed or re-released.
Those are pretty cool.
Yeah, for me, I think everything started with LA Gear. LA Gear was a shoe that came out probably mid to late 1990s, I would say. When you step on the shoe or when you walk, there was a lighting unit in the back, so it would light up.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, I actually never had those, but I've always watched kids wearing them at school, and I was so jealous. So I'd say I've been a on and off sneakerhead, if you could call it that. I was exposed to the sneaker world at a very early age, but because I didn't play sports growing up, I lost interest in sneakers beyond that. But then in high school, that's when MTV was pretty big. I was very into 2000 hip hop, and you'd always see the rappers wearing Air Force Ones in the music videos.
Yeah, like Nelly, right?
Yeah, but for me, I think it was Young Jeezy. Well, I mean, he goes by Jeezy now, but you remember the song? I don't know if you were into the rap team back then.
school Chevy, the drop top Porsche. You couldn't walk a mile off in my Air Force. And you ain't seen what I seen. I can get 100,000 in these Sean John jeans. I went from old school Chevys to drop top Porsche.
So there was a period of time where I was always watching music videos on MTV, and eventually I found myself really getting into the streetwear scene. I'd say the music videos really got me back into sneakers.
So when you say back, you said that, so assuming that the LA Gear was kind of like your first foray into like the world of sneakers, and then you kind of lost track until 2000?
Yes, I'd say that.
So switching gears right now.
Sure. So the second topic is what makes us fall in love with sneakers, right?
Yeah, I think we touched upon this previously, right? Is it more to do like with the collaboration or the story behind limited edition versus the actual design of the shoe?
Sometimes with more, I would say, hyped designers behind it. For example, most commonly known one is the Off-White collaboration that came out. Was it in 2016, 17?
Yeah, I remember that one. I will say that I like that. I was a big fan of that.
Right. So back then, Off-White was a brand that was rising up in the streetwear culture scene, led by Virgil Abloh. So it was a very high in demand brand in itself. The fact that he had collaborated with Nike brought the hype to it. I think for many, his take on it was very unique, and others might have a different perspective on what Off-White represents. But I think Virgil usually tries to take a very industrial approach.
Well, so when I saw those, like the Virgil Abloh, kind of like the bigger fan of the Jordan Virgil Ablohs. I don't know if it's true that they're like the most expensive ones. Of the
I think they are
collaboration.
about $5,000, $6,000 resale price these days.
That's crazy. But
Right.
like the Jordan 1 is a very good looking shoe, but it's the detail on them is really cool, and that's what makes it stand out versus kind of like a normal Jordan 1. So like the extra stitching, the air, the tag.
Yeah, they have this, I'd say, a very Frankenstein, or no, not the Frankenstein's monster kind of vibe to it. The stitching is especially exposed. There's a lot of things that are usually be knitted in a way that it's not shown. And I think that was a very fresh take that we probably haven't seen in the past.
So it came out, I had no idea who Virgil Abloh was. I thought he was just like another kind of artist at Nike, for if I'm being honest. So
Like Tinker Hatfield?
Yeah, like Tinker Hatfield. For me, the name behind it wasn't even a big attraction to me. It was purely the design of it.
Oh, I see.
Like even from the design, I could see why that'd be kind of like a more expensive, very sought after shoe. Also, I kind of think it looks like not so much a Frankenstein, but like a drawing board. This is what a Jordan 1 should look like. I was like, this is what I'm thinking of, and it's like that's a really cool take.
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, so it is sometimes about the hype behind the designer who's collaborating with the certain brand. It's also the design itself that makes it very appealing. That's why it creates demand. But there's also collaborations where it's all about the story behind it. Oftentimes, boutiques that collaborate with certain sneakers, I think you often see this with Asics or Saucony, which are less known brands, especially in the US.
Oh, New Balance too has a lot.
And New Balance too, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So with those sneaker brands, they often try to tell a story with the release. So there's a boutique in Boston called Concepts, right? A few years ago when Nike SB was really picking up, they released a series of shoes based on lobsters, which is a famous local food in Boston, right? The colorways are purple, green, and red. And to replicate the scissors on lobsters, they kind of put this rubber band thing on the shoe to give it that lobster vibe. So that release has a unique story behind it. The Concepts being a famous boutique in Boston. They've released many collaborations over the years. And then, they've incorporated something that was unique to Boston itself, right? So for that example, I think there was a story behind it that made it unique.
I'm looking at this too. They have the inside liner also is like a picnic, or kind of like your tray that you get the lobster in, right? The picnic,
Yeah. Right.
The pattern, like the red and white pattern.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the packaging was unique as well.
It's like a fit lobster crate.
No, I don't think so. Or do you have an image?
Like a lobster.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Let me take that back. Yeah, it was a lobster crate. And then the shoes itself were inside a plastic bag, so that it looks like you had purchased lobsters on the website, and then it was shipped to you.
Oh, nice.
So there was a story behind it, and then the sneakers themselves were very unique. The colorways are unique, and then the packaging, I think, brought it to another level. No, I'm personally not into Nike SBs anymore because I don't really skate. Yeah, but if I was still a very prominent sneaker collector, I probably would have gone after these shoes for sure. Yeah, added to my collection.
One of my friends is actually a very big SB collector, so he has like the Californias. He has like a couple of others. But he told me, he introduced me to like the SBs as a whole, and like you mentioned like the pigeons. Those ones are, it's crazy how much those resale for.
Yeah, the pigeons Jeff Staple had released an panda version, but nothing really beat the originals.
Why does nothing beat the originals in that case?
Oftentimes, it's about nostalgia. So I think the same thing could be said with the cars and the watches. As a kid growing up, there's certain sneakers that you want, but can never obtain it, whether it be the access to the shoe or it could be just money. So when you're an adult, now that you have money and you have access with the internet, people kind of strive for shoes that brings them that certain memory in their life. So for that reason, oftentimes the original never really beats the new releases. So going back to the Jordan 1 example, there's been, how many Jordans has there been? Jordan 30 something now?
They're on 30. They just released 35 this year. I think next year's 36.
Right. But for people our age and above, the original Jordan 1 that came out in 1985, a lot of people could not buy that shoe back then or couldn't afford it back then. So that's why as an adult, now they have access to a little bit more money. People still want the original Jordan 1, even to this day, because it brings in that memory. And some even try to purchase the original that actually came out in 1985, those that you can't wear anymore because it falls apart. It's a nostalgia, and having that in your collection, it brings them happiness, I guess.
So that's kind of like a good way of looking at kind of like older like collaborations and the releases, older limited editions. But what about kind of like more newer limited editions, like I think we talked about the Travis Scott ones?
Well, I think it depends on how much value you put in that specific shoe. So going back to your question about Travis Scott, I think it's about hype. The fact that he's the it guy right now, he's collaborated with even McDonald's to release his own quarter pounder, which is essentially just the same thing with bacon in it. But people actually lined up to try it out. So everybody wants to be part of the culture and part of experience the same thing as everybody else. In order to do that with shoes, you actually need to get your hands on the shoes. So that's why a lot of people are going out the same shoe, to be able to actually say, I have this shoe too, look at me, or something like that. I don't know.
So previously you mentioned that reselling was kind of more of a community thing. People would go on Nike Talk and kind of see a collection and then like offer humble money to whoever has that shoe in their collection. But do you think so much of it right now is kind of like fear of missing out, or kind of like the Instagram, like I've had this shoe, like kind of flexing, that next level of flexing? That the
Flexing
prices
is
are so high.
Flexing is definitely part of the culture now, with Instagram coming in and people having this platform to show off what they own. But there's a terminology called fuckboys in our streetwear culture and sneaker culture. Those are individuals that happen to have a lot of money for whatever reason it is, and they get to buy the most hyped clothing brand or the sneakers. And the reason why they're buying it oftentimes is not because, well, it could be because they are supportive of the brand, but it's also to show off. In this, like I said, in this streetwear culture, showing off what you have has always been part of the essence, I guess you can say. And I don't know if it's because hip hop and the sneaker streetwear culture is so closely related. If you remember all the music videos from the 90s and 2000s, it's always, well, even now, but it's always been about showing off your wealth, your success. Because a lot of times these people, they come from nothing and they reach the top, so they want to show off what they have, and that has transferred over to the sneaker culture as well. And now with Instagram, as you had mentioned earlier, that has grown to a larger scale where not just the stars are doing it on their music videos, it's regular people are doing it on Instagram and becoming influencers. And once you become influencers, I won't go into too much of the influence culture on this podcast, but to answer your question, I'd say that some people are actually buying it so they can show it off. And if you probably break it down, there's people who are stans of Travis Scott that want to purchase anything Travis Scott. Then the second group would be those that might be just in the culture and love sneakers and they want to add it to their collection. And then there's the fuckboys that want to show off. And the three groups combined, that creates a very high demand for a very limited quantity release for you and I, who might be interested in that sneaker, but might not be as passionate about the sneaker itself unless we pay a very, very, very high premium. I don't think we'll be able to have that in a collection. I think that's okay. I think it's all comes down to how much value you find in that certain release and whether or not you're willing to pay more to get that. And I don't think that's something that will ever go away.
We kind of strayed away from like the designs of all of these collabs. I think the kind of the dunk was a really cool one. We talked about that, as well as the Jordan 1 off-white. This is something that I thought was really a really good looking shoe, was a really like even just kind of like an artistic point of view. Kind of moving over to that Travis Scott collaboration, I didn't really see why it was that. From an artistic point of view, I think it was lacking, right? For me personally, right? If we were just kind of go from a Travis Scott Jordan 1 to an off-white Jordan 1, and maybe it's just because I'm so used to how a Jordan 1 looks, but the flip switch looks terrible, in my personal opinion.
Design-wise, I think that was very unique to that shoe. If I'm not mistaken, there's never been a sneaker release where the Nike logo was reversed. So the fact that Nike was willing to change their famous logo on a shoe, I think that was a significant moment for the culture, because that is how much Nike was invested in Travis Scott at that time. I think that was supposed to, or for many sneakerheads, I think that's what that moment represented.
I will say that they did the same thing on the Giannis Antetokounmpo sneaker, the Zoom Freak 1.
Oh. Well, maybe it was the fact that it was actually done on an Air Jordan 1.
Yeah, that was probably...
With so much history behind. For me personally, I'm not a fan too much because of the colorway. Brown has never been a colorway that I've found very appealing on shoes. And I did like what he was trying to do with his other releases, like the SPs, where there was a detachable logo, but that's been done many times in the past. I guess to answer your question, I'm not very much a fan of any of the Travis Scott releases. All right, I think our audience got a sense of what we find appealing in sneakers. So let's talk about our favorite sneaker collaborations and general releases. Phil, do you have any releases that you're just dying to share with the world?
Well, I mean, the Kobe 5 Bruce Lee was up there. That was a really cool one. Not the newer, I think, reverse or alternative one, but the original, yellow and black. But it had like scratches that mimicked the scratch that Bruce Lee got in one of his movies. I think it was Enter the Dragon. I can't remember.
Yes, that's the one. The final fight with the House of Mirrors. Just give me chills, man. Here's the clip.
You have offended my family, and you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
But I was so psyched when this popped up again.
So how much is the resale price on, for example, StockX?
$220. Not terrible, but
in today's market, that's not bad at all.
That's not. Nike, with their Kobe line, they came out with like a Pro line, which was essentially their dated shoes. But I think with these, a lot of the times people really played in them. So a lot of them were just bought and played in and then just throw it away.
Oh, I mean, that's good for the culture. You know, that's what sneakers are meant to be. That's what you're supposed to do with sneakers, wear them.
Yeah.
I am a strong believer of that.
Athletically?
No, even with regular day-to-day sneaker releases. For example, if I happen to like the Travis Scott Jordan 1s, I would probably wear them. Even when I was at the peak of my sneaker collection, I've always bought them to wear them. So I don't think I've ever had a sneaker that I did not wear. All right. Any other sneaker releases that you like to share?
I will talk about the Nike Mags
Okay.
because that is the shoe from coolest movie ever. Probably the best movie ever. Not really, but one of the most iconic movies ever. Back to the Future Part 2. The hovering DeLorean was definitely something that got me into cars.
Ooh. Check out our previous episode for our thoughts on cars.
But also, I think there's just a lot of like cool stuff in there, like auto lacing shoes. I don't know really if auto lacing shoes existed in filmography before. They might have, but I think that was one of the most like iconic shots of a shoe lacing itself.
Yes, that scene was so iconic, not just for sneakerheads. You know, I remember watching it as a kid. I got goosebumps.
Power laces, all right.
I think behind the scenes, there are literally just people underneath the stage, just pulling the strings down.
Don't ruin the movie magic, though.
I'm just saying. So they've come out with a series of like non-self-lacing Nike Mags, but they recently came out with an actual functioning Nike Mag. Granted, it works a lot slower,
right,
than the ones did in the movies, but it is still a full functioning self-lacing shoe, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, I think that's more of a kind of like a nerd in me, the hat Nike release. But I think that was probably the more awesome shoe releases out there.
For sure. Would you ever buy it?
If it was a normal shoe price, yeah.
Assuming you had all the money in the world and you didn't have to worry about money, obviously you would, be donating a lot of money to nonprofits. But if you had a little bit of extra money left over, would you buy it? Do you feel it's worth buying, even if the price is very high?
Probably not. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Because it's not something you can really. I know like technology's gotten a lot better. Shoe glue is getting a lot better, but it's such a. And they have people that are restoring shoes, so you'd have to like get one of them to restore your sole every once in a while. But I don't know, just a $1,500 shoe doesn't make sense to me.
Not even just to have it in your collection?
No.
Oh,
I mean,
wow,
it's like
okay.
you said, right? Like a shoe's meant to be worn. But if you wear a shoe, it wears out. So then it's not a $1,500 shoe anymore, right? It's a few $100,000 shoe at some point if you keep on wearing it. And even having however many shoes I have right now, I don't wear all of them all the time. So it's like, it feels like such a waste.
Yeah, it's definitely a dilemma that all sneakerheads have had in the past. But maybe now more so because of our consciousness with the environment. All right, so my favorite collab during the past maybe 5 to 10 years. Sometimes for sneakerheads, they build their fashion or their style based on the sneakers. But for me, I think it's always been a part of my outfit. So aesthetic has always been a pretty important component to what I like. Obviously, there's functionality that come into play, like the Ultra Boost. The reason why I like that shoe was because it was easy to wear, but also easy to match with any fashion, I'd say. But when it comes to my favorite sneakers, it's about aesthetics and the designer behind it. So I would say one of my favorite collaborations that came out most recently was the Nike and a Cold Wall collaboration with the Zoom Vomero 5. Provide a little context. The Nike Vomero series is the running shoes that originally came out in 2006, and now I think they're at number 15 as of this recording. The specific shoe that was used for this collaboration is the Nike Vomero 5, which came out in 2010. But also, Nike has worked with famous designers whenever they want to re-release an older shoe. I think this was part of that approach. So they had reached out to a Cold Wall led by Samuel Ross. So for those that may not be familiar, so it's a London-based brand that recreates, I'd say, functional everyday pieces, but with his own take. Based on what I read, his inspiration comes from the UK workwear and the blue-collar culture, but also has a very dystopian, somewhat cyberpunk-ish vibe to all the clothing that he releases. In any case, so the original one came out in 2018 and it was worn in the Cold Wall fashion show. So that release had a dystopian vibe to it, but also futuristic. So the shoe design, it looks exactly like the Nike Vomero 5. There's just plastic piece or sculpture that's attached to the back of the shoe that protrudes. And then the whole shoe is white, but the insole, the inside of the shoe, is red. So it's a very simple shoe. It's kind of hard to explain why I love it. I think it's just the way, the shape of the shoe, by adding that piece in the back of it, creates this very futuristic techwear vibe. I've always been a fan of techwear because I'm a big sci-fi fan. So and that's where the appeal is. And the shoe itself, the technology-wise, it's a very comfortable shoe, walking shoe. But the resale price is was fairly high. I think it was about 500 or so, 600 or so. So it didn't entice me to go ahead and make that purchase.
What do you consider techwear?
So techwear, oftentimes techwear, they incorporate a lot of zippers. Sometimes to the point where it's really unnecessary. So oftentimes people associate techwear with cargo pants. They have a lot of pockets. So quote unquote, it is functional. You can put a lot of stuff in there. But sometimes they just do it too much. The jewelry it has no purpose. It's just a pocket for the sake of a pocket.
Okay, so the utility for the sake of aesthetic versus, is that what you're kind of getting at? Okay. So what's the utility of that block?
So with this, it's just a design. There's no functional purpose. In fact, in a recent interview, Simon Ross addresses the quote unquote sculpture controversy. Here's a clip from that interview.
Now, what happened after producing this shoe we're looking at now is that we produced the Nike Air Vomeros, which of course have the, again, controversial, notorious brutalist sculpture on the back of the shoe. Now, the sculpture itself is more sort of a talking point to discuss what's happening on the lower and upper of the shoe. And what's actually happening on the lower and upper is that all of the UV coatings and PU coatings have been removed from every single panel on that shoe, which means that as you take that shoe through different environments, there's a different aging process which exists on each of those panels. That then means that you have this beautiful aged patina, which is localized based on where you take the shoe over a specific amount of time. It was the notion of how do we take something which is typically, deemed as dead and inanimate and actually add a layer of life to it, whilst keeping this personalized notion of footwear and intimacy that people have with sneakers and trainers.
If you're comparing it to a skull culture, with customized cars, sometimes you have really big spoilers that really don't mean anything. It adds value to the driver because they like that big spoiler.
Usually done on really cheap cars.
Or like the Japanese, people also look at Yankee culture. They add spoilers to cars just for the sake of adding it because they think it looks cool. That would be kind of a close comparison, but I know while I say that, I'm devaluing a Cold Wall brand to Yankee culture in Japan, so maybe that's not the best approach, but...
I mean, either that or you're introducing them to an awesome culture.
Yes, if you ever go to Japan, go to the highways late at night on Saturday at like 3 a.m, you'll find a lot of people with customized cars and bikes gathered.
Yeah, so I guess maybe it's kind of like this, but this is not designer by any means.
Yeah. In that world, the most flashiest and the loudest is the best.
Yeah.
But anyways.
But that's a big thing because it's like anti-Japanese, right?
Anti-establishment. That's what the whole culture is about.
Yeah.
But with the Cold Wall, it's more about avant-garde kind of thing. Which, avant-garde can be very fluid depending on who you are and what I think that's the best way I can explain it. I think one of the reasons as to why I like the shoe, it also has to do with I just like it as part of the Soul collection and what the collection brought as a vibe. And for that reason, I think I find that shoe appealing. So before we move on to the sneaker collaborations, let's take a quick commercial break. All right, we're back. For our new listeners, this is the last segment called CaʒCon Workshop, where Phil and I share our own unique designs. For this episode, we were both tasked to design our own sneaker collaboration. to the CaʒCon Workshop. So, Phil, I'd like for you to go first. Speak to the sneaker collab that you had created, maybe touching upon why you chose this shoe, what the concept might be, and what makes it unique. For our listeners, we'll be posting our sneaker design on our WordPress, so please check that out.
Okay. I wanted to create a shoe with a love of cars and motorsport in mind. And ASICS is a Japanese company, so who is one of the most famous race car drivers, motorsports people from Japan?
Are you talking about the Mean Machine?
I've never heard of that one before.
No, if you watch it, if you look it up, you'll know. Wacky Races.
Wacky Races. I've never seen this before.
No way. Yes, you have.
I've never seen this before.
Wait, so you're telling me you don't know who Muttley is? Like, you've seen this guy, right?
I've seen him, but I've never
No,
watched
what-
anything with him.
Oh, he's always laughing like.
Anyway, I don't think this is a Japanese cartoon though. I'm talking about Speed Racer. You might not know that he's actually from Japan because in the US it was introduced under Hanna-Barbera, but his name is Speed Racer. First name Speed, last name Racer.
We think I remember from Speed Racers. And Rider X.
Yeah, and Rider X. Anyways, back to my sneaker. But I did want to kind of capture the Speed Racer essence to the best of my ability in the shoe. So what I did was kind of model it after it's like Speed Racer inside of the Mach 5. So
Okay.
what you'd see on my shoe is, if you've ever seen a Gel Light 3, there is kind of a little area on the side of the shoe that holds the logo in front of kind of like a netting just for breathability. And so the ASICS logo, which I actually recently found out after doing some research on this, is like a very functional logo that they were going for. It takes kind of like the big color cues from Speed Racer himself, or Go Mifune or Mifune Go? I don't actually remember what his name, which order
Mifune Go.
Mifune Go.
Go is his first name.
Go is his first name?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyways, the big colors, right? Red is are the two lines that go kind of across. Those are kind of representative of the scarf that he wears in most of the adaptations of Speed Racer. The other two colors on the ASICS logo are white for both of his helmet as well as the collared shirt that he typically wears. And then yellow for the color of his gloves. The rest of the shoe is kind of more basic. It is a white shoe. Speed Racer wore white pants. The Mach 5 was pretty much a plain white car. But what I wanted to do was kind of have some more hints of the Mach 5. So right underneath the shoelaces, there is a little M, kind of a homage to Go's helmet, as well as kind of like the hood on the original Mach 5.
Nice.
And then on the back also, there, where you'd usually see the gel under ASICS, there is a 5, like the Go, like the 5 on the Speed Racer car, as well as another M hit on the other shoe.
I love the details.
Thank you. The bottom of the shoe, I was originally thinking of a gum outsole because I really like gum outsoles, but to make it more kind of symbolic of the car, or representative of the Mach 5, the bottom I've actually made black, the outsole. So that's kind of like the tires of the Mach 5, and then the midsole is a very faint silver. I don't really like silver midsoles, so I preferred it to be a little bit lighter, but the silver is kind of the same color as the wheel itself. So you have the wheel, the tire, and then above is the Mach 5. And then the inner lining where your shoe goes, that is red to kind of symbolize the cockpit of the car, the Mach 5. And then your insole, which you can't see, is just like your blue Speed Racer on one, and then Mach Go 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 on the other. One hint, which you won't see on the pictures, I'll try to get another picture of later on, is that this black outsole is actually translucent. And what I wanted to do is, underneath the outsole, I wanted to have a big X to symbolize Racer X.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I wanted to do from kind of like an aesthetic point of view. The carbon fiber heel clip is something that I also added as kind of like a more modern exotic car call to. So it's kind of bringing it more modern. I don't think the original Mach 5 had any carbon fiber in it, but it's something that most race cars have today, Formula 1, Le Mans. So I wanted to make sure that it was ready enough for the modern. That's where I was from the aesthetic point of view. From kind of a materials point of view, obviously the Gel Light 3 consists of kind of two major pieces for its upper, more or less kind of outer protective layer, which adds support, which your laces go into, essentially. That I actually was thinking that that would be out of this new material that ASICS came out with, which is essentially made out of 100% recyclable bottles.
100%.
That's what they claim.
That's amazing.
I don't know that at all. This is the first shoe that I think they're putting this on. Is this, at the time of this recording, a new racing shoe called the Metaspeed Sky.
Okay.
It'll also go on, I think, their Metaspeed Edge too. But again, bringing the shoe kind of more modern racing shoe, environmentally friendly with the new ASICS ethos of trying to reuse recyclable material on that upper. Obviously, again, I mentioned that carbon fiber clip for heel clip for the more modern kind of racing ethos. And then for the midsole, I've also wanted to upgrade it to something a little bit more modern, which is something they've been introducing into their new shoes. Just something that I think most racing shoes have been putting in, which helps with the weight as well as kind of the comfort, which is their Flight Foam Blast Turbo. If you've ever run in their Flight Foam Nova Blast, that is a really fun bouncy shoe, although it's got some stability issues. I'm a big fan. But it's probably something very similar to others like Nike Zoom X or Reebok Float Ride. And yeah, that's my shoe.
So you did incorporate a lot of new technology, but this still is an everyday shoe.
Yes. I mean, I think there's going to be some parts of it. Like the midsole right now isn't very cheap. It's only on kind of like their exclusive racers, so I don't know how economical this shoe would be. I mentioned the midsole and the upper from kind of like the Metaspeed Sky. Those right now, that shoe's retailing for $350. So
Wow.
yeah. I'm
So
sure
assuming this technology becomes available to every shoe that ASICS releases, do you have a price point that you'd want to sell this shoe at?
ideally like mid hundreds, like 150, 160. I think
That's very rare these days to be able to get a collab shoe for 150.
I mean, it's kind of a collab, right? It's a speed racer, so. But the Gel Light 3 also is like a shoe that typically retails for like 110, right? So.
Okay. I guess it depends on how expensive speed racer branding is.
I really think that Wachowski movie kind of killed any chance of speed racer becoming anything bigger than it.
I do like this collab because, as we talked about in the very beginning, there's three types of collabs. I think that this one falls under the story behind it and what it represents. And given your explanation about how you like shoes and how you came up with this concept, if I, as a sneakerhead, I definitely appreciate what this brings to the table, and as well as the impact it would probably has to the culture too. For those that may have grew up around the same time as us and have this nostalgic feeling towards the series and a passion for cars, I think we'll definitely be interested in buying it. So ASICS, if you guys are listening to this podcast, this is one that you guys need to execute for sure.
Thank you.
Right. So moving on to my sneaker collab, I think overall I had a very similar mindset in approaching this. I wanted to recreate something that was eco-friendly. I know carbon footprint is all the talk, but I do firmly believe that that's something that all brands should aspire for. Given how many shoes are being released these days, that's something that to be mindful. So that's one angle that I looked at. The other angle that I looked at was aesthetic. I may not have done a very good job explaining how fashion and aesthetic come together, but I wanted to create something that was appealing to me, something that I had interest in, but also that's something that I could wear as an everyday shoe.
Mhm.
And I know there's been a lot of shoes out there in the past and even today that have been all blacked out, but I wanted to see if I could take my own approach on it, incorporating some of the concepts that I find appealing. So my inspiration was the B2 Stealth Bomber. I wanted to take elements from the B2 Stealth Bomber, for me, very appealing as an aircraft, which was the matte black finish and the shape of the wing. Those that may be into aircraft might take offense, but the easiest way to explain it is a W that's being placed on a 90-degree angle, I guess.
Mhm.
So the wings spread out like the size of a W, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if the listeners are curious, I think a B2 bomber is a good explanation.
Right. So I wanted to bring that to the design. And I thought about all the sneakers that has been released in the past, and I ended up with the Nike Huaraches. There's a plastic piece that sticks out in a similar way as the B2 bomber wings. So I tried to leverage that design into the sneakers. And then also the reason why I chose the Nike Huarache was the fact that this was a running shoe. As a avid runner, not so much these days, but as someone that used to be an avid runner.
He's lying. He's actually he runs a lot more than he gives himself up to be.
So this Nike Huarache was one of the first running shoes that was designed by the architect himself, Tinker Hatfield. So I wanted to also play a homage to
Tinker Hatfield also designed the Jordan 1, and who else did he? He did a lot of Kobe's. I don't know what else. What else did he do?
all the famous shoes that probably came out late 80s all the way to early 2000s. It's probably all Tinker Hatfield.
For Nike,
there's-
right? Or
For Nike, yeah. And there's also a very there's an awesome Netflix docuseries called Abstract: The Art of Design. So check it out. There's an episode on sneaker design, and Tinker Hatfield provides his thoughts. A famous quote by him is, "A basic design is always functional, but a great one will say something."
nice. I like that.
Anyway, so I wanted to pay homage to something that Tinker Hatfield had designed. So, and then also incorporate new technology that was eco-friendly. Similar to ASICS, Nike has a goal to reduce their carbon footprint by 50% by 2050, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of this effort, they've been releasing new technology that incorporates reusable plastic into their fly knits as well as their fly leather. So it's not 100%. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 50% recycled plastic and then the other 50% new material. But they're making a strive towards that direction. So my sneaker design does incorporate all of that technology too. Exterior-wise, because it's inspired by the B2 Stealth Bomber, it's a matte black finish from top to bottom. But if you actually look at the B2 Stealth Bomber, there's a different range of blacks that they use.
Mhm.
So it does depend on the lighting, but the end of the bomber has a darker black, whereas the front end of the Stealth Bomber has a lighter black. And then they also have white lining as well as orange lighting mixed in. So that is all incorporated into my shoe. The front end of the sneaker tends to be a lighter color, and the back end of the shoe, including the wing that the Huarache has, is all a darker color palette. And then, similar to the actual bomber, I have hints of white and orange mixed in.
I really like that white stitching.
Oh, thanks. I put a lot of effort into recreating that when I was drawing it.
I also like that orange hit that you mentioned about that mirrors the B2 bomber lighting.
And then in terms of material, so the wing, I'm pretty sure there's an official terminology, but the back of the Huarache, for this part, similar to what Phil was discussing, I wanted something that was translucent, just to be eco-friendly. I don't know if they have recycled plastic that's also translucent, but if they do, I would probably want to leverage that in making this shoe. The tongue and the midsole of the shoe will be recycled nylon, just to continue with the concept of environmentally friendly. by leveraging this new technology, I'm hoping to create something that is appealing and it's comfortable and breathable, and yet a little bit more eco-friendly in comparison to some of the other shoes that has come out in the recent years. And going along with that concept, the outsole of the shoe will leverage crater foam, which was a new technology that was most recently introduced with Nike's Space Hippies, what they branded as a shoe that leverages a lot of recycled plastic or recycled material for the outsole, but that's what they were using. But otherwise, that's my shoe.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like some of the small subtle hits that you have, like that white stitching and the orange, that orange hit to kind of reflect the B2 bomber. And I really like the different shades of black that you have on there. I'm personally typically not like a black shoe guy very much, but I think having these different shades helps a lot in kind of the wearability for me personally.
Yeah, for me too. I've been a fan. I have been to wear a lot of black clothing, but for shoes, I've never been a fan of just black. So I was hoping to achieve what you just explained.
All right, so Nike, if you hear this, put this one out there too. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool shoe collaboration. Do you have an idea for what kind of box you'd use?
Box?
Yeah. So you know how we talked about like the lobster?
Oh, no, I haven't thought about that.
I haven't thought about what the Speed Racer shoe would look like either, but that'd be pretty awesome. Yeah. But this is a really cool, like I mentioned, I think like this is something that I definitely pick out, especially for like a black shoe. Something that's a lot easier to wear for me.
All right, so that was our sneaker design. I just can't wait for the day when we can actually design our own sneakers.
So if you've ever thought about why a shoe design maybe appeals to you, leave us a comment, either our WordPress, which is casual contemplation podcast.wordpress.com,
or on our Instagram, Casual Contemplation Podcast, all one word.
Yeah, so leave us a comment there on either of those places, or maybe you can draw us a sketch and tag us on Instagram, I think on or send us an email. Our email is casualcontemplationpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes.
Or link it to DM it to us. We're not blocking anybody yet.
And of course, if you made any mistakes about some of the terminology or some technologies, and if you guys are a sneakerhead, please feel free to correct us or provide us a comment either on our social media or via email.
Yeah.
Just be nice.
Just be nice. Well, keep it honest, keep it respectful.
Right.
And be on the lookout for our next episode, which is wearables. Thanks for listening.
Peace.